Good afternoon, Colombo. Good morning, Toronto. And good afternoon, some of our friends are joining from the Middle East. So I welcome everybody for this webinar. Today I'm going to talk to you about leadership moments during COVID economy. And basically what I'm going to talk to you about is that what I have learned from during COVID economy, what I have learned looking at the leaders around the world, what they did and what they didn't do during the COVID time. And I have summarized it, and I would like to share that with you today. So I have it in my, today I have going to talk to you about the 5 areas. One is the COVID and change, meaning COVID economy, what change that we have experienced, and that change, how that change related to leadership, and also going to talk to you about leadership moments, where I will take into consideration today of how the political leaders responded, and also the business leaders, as well as the community leaders. And learning from these leaders, what are the 3 imperatives that we can actually learn, and to see whether we could also put that into practice. And after my presentation, that I would like to leave a question behind you. Ask your question, are you an authentic leader? So I will take about 25 minutes of my presentation. And as you know that there are so many people joining on the call, so I cannot leave room for anybody to comment, so you will be muted. So if you have any questions, please send in your questions and we will respond to you. There will be also another webinar that will be there in about 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now, and we'll keep you informed of the date. That's a follow-up of this webinar today. I would like to ask the question before I start taking you through about almost 25 minutes of my findings. What is the only constant thing in this world? And I'm sure that you will have a lot of answers, and there are no right or wrong answer. But for me, the answer is change. A Greek philosopher said, change is the only constant in life. So which means that only sure thing in this world is change. We are all experiencing a major change due to pandemic. We call it new normal. And how you changed? I'm again asking questions. Have you changed? How did you change? At what changes you have abreast with? And what did influence you to make the change? Who inspired you? So when you answer these questions, that you will see some other names will appear. And then you will see some authentic leaders who have influenced you to make the change. I'm talking about you and also for the organizations. But during the pandemic, we have been exposed to messages from multitude of people around the world. I'm sure it's a correct statement. It is important to reflect who inspired you. Is he or she is an opinion leader or opinion former? One is a close member of your family or friends whom you look up for advice. The latter is a person who has the authority to talk about it. In some countries, it is a member of the armed force, and some part of the world is the medical expert, and some places it could be a politician or a religious leader. Usually, people do not envy change, and we do not like it either. The reason why we hate it, because it challenges our status quo. It is troublesome and makes it inconvenient for us. Some principles apply to organizations as well. These changes need to be managed very well. And that is where your authentic leadership comes. So change requires management. A successful management requires an authentic leadership. That's what the message that I would like to drive in. And let me start giving you my findings. Today, we are going to discuss a few leaders and their moments during the COVID economy from around the world, mainly from the domains of political, business, and community. And what I would do in the end of my presentation, before I conclude, I'll summarize the three imperatives. Firstly, let me discuss with you leadership styles of the political leaders of countries, where we have seen many leadership styles and approaches, such as I would like to summarize it by way of saying the democratic leadership, authoritative leadership, a hybrid of democratic and authoritative leadership, and also some crazy approaches. And as you know, that health of economy and business is urgently and visibly linked with the health of politicians, society, and the planet. So I see here, if you see it here in this slide, that you will see the four types of leaderships that we have seen during the COVID economy. First one is the engaged leadership. It's a democratic approach. And what did they do? There was no lockdown at all, freedom of people and goods movement. There were a lot of handouts to affected people and organizations. And this approach persuaded people to practice the new normal rules. They mobilized the people around shared purpose and value. And I call it the engaged leadership. And what are the result of these countries by this leadership? They had a well-managed COVID economy, and they managed the COVID outbreak very well. And there were one country from the Europe that you can take that into consideration, and one country in the down under can be taken into consideration. For political reason, I'm not going to mention those countries, and I'm sure that you would know what I'm talking about. The second one is a directive leadership, and it's called the authoritative approach. What did they do? They completely locked down. And it's a kind of a military style operation, limited handouts to the affected people and organizations. This approach demanded compliance and obedience with rules, and I call it a directive leadership. What was the end result? Poorly managed COVID economy and also the COVID outbreak. The third types of leadership is a consensus leadership, and it's a hybrid democratic and authoritative approach. Limited lockdown, freedom of people and goods movement, handouts to affected people and organizations. This approach is to persuade people to practice new normal rules. It's pretty much similar to the democratic approach, but there were the lockdown there were some areas were locked down. So whatever that is, the most urgent, important areas were opened and the others were locked down. And this leadership style, I call it the consensus leadership style. And what was the result? They did manage the COVID economy, not as much as the first one, engaged leadership, but they managed COVID economy well. and COVID outbreak. The last one is called expert leadership, which is one of the craziest leadership styles. And they approached they totally ignored the effects of COVID to the population. No lockdown at all by the federal government, but however, the provincial government decided to implement limited lockdown and no handouts to affected people or to the organizations, if at all, it was very little. Lack of totally ignorant direction for people to practice new normal rules. And I call it an expert leaders. And my definition of that is expect competence and self-direction. There was no direction given by, even if there was direction given by the federal government, but it wasn't practiced from the leader himself. And what was the end result? A poorly managed COVID economy and the COVID outbreak. So these are 4 different types. There were so many different types of leadership, but for these purposes that I have identified the 4 leadership styles based on their practice and what we have experienced. So the health of the economy, as I told earlier, is urgently and visibly linked with the health of the political leaders, the society, and the planet. However, all what I spoke about these 4 leadership styles, that finally we can zero into 3 key imperatives. And they are purpose. They had a purpose, whether it's right or wrong, they had a purpose. And they also had a stakeholder commitment, stakeholder support, I would call it, and resilience. And these 3 imperatives have helped them to pave the way to come out with whatever the decision that they took to resolve the COVID economy issues as well as the COVID outbreak. Let us discuss a few success stories and failures of few industries and organizations around the world. So I have put in, you see this slide that there were a few industries that I have stated above and the others at the bottom. I think one of the success stories during the COVID economy was online retailing. And I think Amazon did it very well. They got themselves very well organized. They got their inventory to their godowns, that wherever that they had their warehouses, and they did an extremely good job delivering to the doorstep. And there were some brands that came up very well, particularly in North America, which delivered the food mainly to their doorstep. And their DoorDash, Grubhub, and Uber Eats are a few examples that I could quote. Then the other one is workspace solutions. People didn't go to work, people work from home. So Zoom immediately responded, and they came out with the Zoom meetings that people could have it from wherever they are without going into one location to have a meeting. Supermarkets, people had to go to supermarkets to buy groceries. And what did they do? They identified that there were restaurants closed and some people would like to have the cooked food. So supermarkets expanded. I think it's mainly happened in the North America. They expanded with ready-to-eat food. So you buy groceries, you buy ready-to-eat food, and so that they took some responsibilities from restaurants, or what opportunities that the restaurants had, that they were resilient enough to create this so that their customers were able to have the ready-to-eat food. Other one is hand sanitizers. Hand sanitizers did extremely good job of work, very resilient. They realized that people now need to use it, and they used almost all the touch points of the customer, whether they are going to enter premises, whether they are going to enter a mall or a supermarket or whatever that location, they had their counters, they had their units. So they expanded their range in order to look at each touch point of the customer so that they have had access to the hand sanitizers. The liquor stores. The people are at home and there'll be more consumption of liquor, but there are no parties. So what did actually they do? They created virtual parties called the Zoom parties. So there are no restriction, as you know, that many parts of the world have restrictions. Only 10 people can be in a house or 5 people can be in a house. And if it's outside, it can be 25 people. But virtually, you can have any amount of people having parties. So liquor was served on a Zoom, and which is created parties, virtual parties via Zoom. The entertainment area. The Netflix did an extremely good job of work. They had a lot of portfolio of movies that they've been able to bring in during that time. So this gives you some of the examples of success stories from the industries. Then also we'll talk about some of the probably certain disasters or certain businesses that need to close down that, cellular service operators really exploited the situation at this stage. And because everybody needed them, because everybody need to communicate from wherever they are, so the cellular service operators became the key. But I would say that I would definitely say that they were resilient enough to exploit the customers. Airline operators, they had to scale down. People were not flying, but they kept in touch with the stakeholders, and they did, to a certain extent, they did an extremely good job in terms of keeping their stakeholders contented. Hospitality and tourism, they need to scale down, but there were some organizations offered discounted rates to attract people to come into their premises, to their businesses, to keep the business ticking. Commercial banks, some commercial banks help their customers with regard to restructuring their loans, particularly paying back the credit card balances. That they did, and they kept communicating with their customers, and some commercial banks didn't do that. So obviously people who responded, the organization that responded to their customers, and who actually shared their purposes and their value with the customers may have decided that they need to build loyalty with those banks. And those who did not communicate, those who did ignore them during that time, will definitely have the customer response negatively. So we learned a lot of lessons. To summarize this also, I go back to the three the imperatives, which is the purpose, the stakeholder support, and the resilience. Let us also discuss the community leaders quickly. Medical profession, they volunteered to play an active role during this time, and they basically expressed their purpose, and they provided the support to their people, their customers, their clients, or their people. And military officials, they became an essential part of the government service to provide health services to the public. They responded very fast. Media, the social media, played a vital role in educating the public of new normal rules. Friends and family, some walked the talk, some didn't, some were totally ignored. So you also realize during this COVID economic times that who actually a friend who gave you the best advice or who didn't give you the good advice. And some people really practiced the new normal rules. Some people didn't. And some people face consequences due to that. And that's a part of leadership too. The religious leaders too convey the message of the new normal rules. They're trying to influence the people by way of sending the right messages. So we saw that there were opinion leaders and opinion formers emerged during this time. So to summarize the community leaderships that we have seen, some examples which I given here, we noticed that there were three types of people. There were active people, there were passive people, and there were ignorant people. And we also realized that positive leadership during these uncertain times is important for the success of the society and economy of the country. And looking at these leadership styles, I would again like to summarize the three key imperatives. Was the purpose came in very well, stakeholder support was really shown, and the resilience. And these were the three important imperatives for the success during the COVID economy times. So having discussed many examples now, we realize that so many challenges colliding at once. Many leaders have struggled, some are still struggling to find the right path to resolve the economic issues during the pandemic. However, those who acted on the three key imperatives that I spoke to you about have helped them pave the way. Let me explain them more in detail. The leadership imperatives are, as I told you, is the purpose, stakeholder support, and resilience. So let me take one by one and explain to you. Leadership imperatives number one is clarifying purpose that reflects personal values and beliefs of stakeholders. So the organization purpose has a reflection of the people values and the beliefs of stakeholders. We have seen many leaders and organizations scale down their businesses. They went small, or they only look at the bottom line fundamentals and metrics. Instead, narrowing down their focus during the pandemic, the leaders, the authentic leaders, have gone on reminding the stakeholders of their guiding principles, their purpose. They emphasized on their purpose. And they share their intentions to the world at large and instilling the confidence and goodwill. And in this way, the employees, the consumers, the investors, and the other stakeholders had gravitated towards the organization whose purpose reflected in their personal values and beliefs. So these leaders, these authentic leaders, were able to align the organization's purpose to their stakeholders' purpose, which are the values and beliefs that the stakeholders had. And by doing that they were able to get their fullest support. And that supports with the leaders' imperatives number two. Supporting stakeholders who will galvanize trust, confidence, and morale required to forge ahead. So you need to take right actions to protect those who rely on you and the organization. And I'm talking about here is the stakeholders. The vulnerable or whose needs are becoming increasingly difficult. This means you need to identify individuals' needs of your stakeholders. That includes customers, investors, employees, communities, and the society at large. This way, you will be able to determine how to serve them effectively. More information, better information help you to take the right decisions. From short-term decisions like how to continue with the usual operations demanded during the new normal times, with, of course, social distancing, wearing a mask, testing fever where it is possible, sanitizing, washing hands regularly, avoiding touching your face, etc. In the long run, considerations such as employment compensation that include current wages and retirement benefits, etc. It may also include redesigning supply chain management to support local employment while also strengthening the resiliency of the operation. As we know, it is the stakeholders who will drive success and measure the organization's performance. Supporting them in the time of pandemic will galvanize the trust, confidence, and morale required to forge ahead. And this is what we have seen in all major organizations, countries, and in the communities. The third imperative is further strengthen the emotional and organizational resilience. Here I'm talking about your own emotional resilience and the organizational resilience. So in addition to having a robust purpose and a solid plan to protect your stakeholders, the leaders must work on marshalling resources to resolve issues, to stay on course, to handle the kind of attention that comes by doing so. However, the progress may not be immediately apparent, but it will come soon or later. And we have seen that in down under, there were elections were held, and one of the leaders came into power. They were re-elected with the record-breaking vote numbers that she had. So for you to become a leader that is noticeable and recognized apart from demonstrating, you need to make time for activities that restore your energy, gain perspectives, and gathering data, etc. It is not you who will do everything. You cannot do everything in this kind of situation. You need to empower your teams. You may not be able to demonstrate your resilience if you're faced with overwhelming volume of critical decisions. Thus, you need to delegate authority and loosen all tight controls. The organization resilience will only surface when more stakeholders actively get involved in decision making and sharing perspective. This means you need to have more cross-functional teams functioning with clear mandates. Empowering leaders with the right temperament and character that include those who stay curious and flexible and are willing to make the tough, even unpopular calls is vital for the thoughtful and swift decision making. So we saw in some countries that the political leaders had to take very unpopular calls, very unpopular decisions. But they had to take those decisions taking into consideration of the current situation in order to control the COVID outbreak as well as the economy. So having said that, I think we're almost into my concluding remarks, statements. Once again, that I would like to share with you that what we noticed during this COVID economy, the leadership imperatives that came into limelight is the purpose, stakeholder support, and the resilience. So if I may conclude the session by stating every step involves choices that can be considered as the best, worst, or so-so or crazy. Sometimes it is difficult to make choices during good times, and imagine that when you are taking decisions, tough decisions during the global pandemic that we have been experiencing. It's not easy. So as leaders, we need some instinct and actions that will see us through this global crisis, and it will make us stronger as we face longer-term challenges too. The ability to understand who we are and what we value, recognize responsibilities and opportunities, and chart a course based on our fundamental goals and purpose while supporting our own emotional resilience, and that of the organization. And these are the skills that will fortify us in the years and decades ahead. As we navigate an uncertain road today, our approach as authentic leaders to this moment will inform the way we lead tomorrow. The authentic leaders will emerge during the COVID economy, and because that they were being able to express their purpose, believe in their purpose, sharing their purpose with their stakeholders, and supporting the stakeholders, and being resilient and being changing that is required, and taking the right decision for the organization's success and the stakeholders' success. The COVID economy demands changes. Changes required are not easy to follow. It needs an egoistic and empathetic management. This means the management team needs an authentic leadership. So, in the last statement that I would like to make is that the COVID economy, in order to find solutions during this COVID economy, that it's the leadership that plays the pivotal role. So I would like to leave this thought with you. Are you an authentic leader? If you are, great. If not, you need to work on it. And how can I do that? How can you do that? Yes, we can help you. We at WHITESPACE can help you. Talk to us. So this summarizes, or this concludes my presentation today on the heading of the leadership moments during COVID economy. These are contact details. Please feel free to contact us if you need further information, and please send in your questions to us. We will go through those questions and we will definitely respond. And some responses may be unique to you, or the questions or the responses that you expect may be unique to you. Maybe some are common. So what we would do is that we will respond to you one-on-one, and we will post we'll upload the other answers in our website or in our Facebook page, that you will be able to see those and develop your leadership skills further in order to manage the situation during the COVID economy. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you very much for listening. And I believe that I'll be able to drive home some serious thoughts on the three imperatives under the leadership during COVID economy. Thank you very much.